My name is Gustavo, and today I come to read Peter Pan in the Kensington Gardens book. Let's continue. Where we last week in the chapter 2, page 90. Chapter 2, Peter Pan. If you ask your mother whether she knew about Peter Pan when she was a little girl, she will say, "Why, of course I did, child." And if you ask her whether he rode on goat in those days, she will say, "What a foolish question to ask." Certainly he did. Then if you ask your grandmother whether she knew about Peter Pan when she was a girl, she also says, "Why, of course I did, child." But if you ask her whether he rode on a goat in those days, she says she never heard of his having a goat. Perhaps she has forgotten you, as she sometimes forgets your name and calls you Mildred, which is your mother's name. Still, she could hardly forget such an important thing as the goat. Therefore, there was not goat when your grandmother was a little girl. This knows that is in telling the story of Peter Pan to begin with the goat, as most people do. He's as silly as to put on your jacket before you vest. Of course, it also knows that Peter is ever so old, but he is really always the same age, so that does not matter in the least. His age is 1 week, and though he was born so long ago, he has never had a birthday, nor is there the slightest chance of his ever having one. The reason is that he escaped from being a human when he was 7 days old. He escaped by the window and flew back to the Kensington Gardens. If you think he was the only baby who ever wanted to escape, it shows how completely you have forgotten your own young days. When David heard this history, first he was quite certain he had never tried to escape. But I told him to think back hard, pressing his hands to these temples, and when he had done this hard, and even harder, he distinctly remembered a youthful desire to return to the treetops, and with that memory came others, and that he lay in bed planning to escape as soon as his mother was asleep, and how she had once caught him half-way of the chimney. All the children could have such recollections if they would press their hands hard to their temples, for having been birds before they were human. They are naturally a little wild during the first few weeks, and very itchy at the shoulders where their wings used to be. So David, tell me, I have to mention here that the following is her way with a story. First I tell it to him, and then he tells it to me. The understanding began that he is quite a different story, and they are retell it with his additions, and so we go on until no one can say whether it is more his history or mine. In this history of Peter Pan, for instance, the bold narratives and most of the moral reflection are mine. Through not all, for this boy can be a stern moralist, but the stirring bits about the ways and customs of babies and beer stage are mostly reminiscences of David's, recalled by pressing his hands to his temples and think hard. Will Peter Pan go out with a window which had no beers? Standing on ledge, he could see trees far away, which were doubtless at the Kensington Gardens, and the moment he saw them, he entirely forgot that he was now a real little boy in a nightgown, and away he flew, right over the house on the gardens. It is wonderful that he could fly without wings, but the place hitched tremendously and perhaps we could all fly if we're is that confident sure on our capacity to do it as was bold Peter Pan that evening. He alighted gaily on the open sward between the baby's place and the Serpentine, and the first thing he did was to lie on his back and kick. He was quite aware already that he had ever been human and thought he was a bird, even in appearance just the same as his early days. And when he tried to catch fly, he don't understand that the reason he missed it was because he had attempted to raise it with his hand, which of course a bird never does. He saw, however, that it must be past lookout time, for there were gagot many fairies about, all too busy to notice him. They were getting breakfast ready, milking their cows, drawing bad water, and so on. And this side of the water pails made him thirsty, so he flew over the round pond to have a drink. He stopped and dripped his beak in the pond. The thought it was his beak, but of course it was only his nose, and therefore very little water came up, and that not so refreshing as usual. So next he tried a puddle, and he fell flop into it. When a real bird falls in flop, he spreads out his feathers and picks them dry. But Peter could not remember that was the thing to do, and he decided rather sulkily to go to sleep on the weeping beach in the baby walk. At first he found some difficulty in balancing himself off the branch, but presently he remembered the way and fell asleep. He awoke long before morning, shivering and saying to himself, "I never was out on such a cold night." He had really been out on colder nights when he was a bird, but, of course, as everybody knows, what seems a warm night to a bird is a cold night to a boy in a nightgown. Peter also felt strangely uncomfortable, as if his head was stuffy. He heard loud noises that made him look round sharply, though they were really himself sneezing. There was sometimes he wanted very much, but though he knew wanted it, he could not think what it was. What he wanted so much was his mother to blow his nose, but that never struck him, so he decided to appeal to fairies for enlightenment. They are reputed to know a good deal. There were two of them strolling along the baby's walk, with their arms round each other's waists, and he hoped down to address them. The fairies have their thieves. With the birds, but they usually give a civil answer to a civil question, and he was angry when these two ran away the moment they saw him. Another was lolling on a garden chair, reading a postage stamp which some human had let fall, and when he heard Peter's voice he popped in alarm behind a tulip. To Peter, bewilderment at his discovery, as every fairy he met fled from him. A band of workmen, who were sawing as towards tool, rushed away, leaving their tools behind them. A milkmaid turned her pail upside down and hid in it. So the gardens were in uproar. Crowds of fairies were running this way and that, asking each other, so Tolly was afraid. Lights were extinguished, doors barricaded, and from the groups of queen maps places came the robot of drums, showing that the royal guard had been called out. A regiment of lancers came charging down the broad walk, armed with holy lips, with which they jacked the enemy horribly in passing. Peter heard the little people crying everywhere that there was human in the garden at the blackout time, but he thought for a moment that we was the human. He was feeling stuffier and more wistful to learn what he wanted done to his now, but he pursued them with the vital question in vain. The timid creatures ran from him, and even the lancers, when they approached the home, turned swiftly into a side wall, on the pretenses that they saw him there. The sparring of the fairies. He resolved to consult the beast, but now he remained as a nothing. That all the birds on the weeping beach had flown away when they alighted on it, and thought this had no troubled him at the time. He saw this meaning now. Every living thing was shunning him. Poor little Peter Pan, he sat down and cried, and even he did not know that for a bird he was sitting on his wrong part. It is blessing that he did not know, for otherwise he would have lost faith in his power to fly, and the moment you doubt whether you can fly, you cease forever to able to do it. The reason birds can fly and we can't is simply that they have perfect flight, for to have flight is so wings, no except 5 flying, no one can reach the island in Serpentine, for the bows of humans are forbidden to land there, and there are stakes round it. Standing up in the water, on edge of which a bird sentinel sits by day and night. It was to island sits by day and night that Peter now flew to put his strange car before Old Solomon Cow, and he alighted on with relief, much heartened to find himself at last won, as the birds called the island. All of them were asleep, including the sentinels except Solomon, who was wide awake on side. And he listened quietly to Peter's adventure, and they held him there true meaning. Look at your nightgown, if you don't believe me. Solomon said, and with staring eyes Peter looked at his nightgown and then at the sleeping birds. Not one of them wore anything. How many of your toes are tombs? An end.